think, first of all, this is about the third book that Dennis and I did together. Maybe the fourth. I think it's the third. And what happened was, for years, I've been called the Hans Christian Andersen of America. And Hans Christian Andersen's birthday was coming up. And a publisher called me and said, an editor called me and said, we wanted to do a picture book on Hans Christian Andersen, and you're the perfect person to do it. Will you do it? I said, of course. I mean, who better? So I started reading everything I could get my hands on. He had written an autobiography, but like all of his life, he made up a lot of it. So you had to find out other stuff about him. So we worked on that, the editor and I, for probably half a year, going back and forth. I would send him what I wanted to do, and then he started thinking about an illustrator. And I don't remember if he came up with or I came up with the idea of Dennis. I think he did. But since I had worked with Dennis before and I knew Dennis quite well because he lives in the area, I thought that was a great idea. And it was really, in some ways, one of the smoothest and easiest books, because once I had decided on how to do it by having bits and pieces of his stories, a line or two from each, from one of his many stories, and he had hundreds of stories, that slotted right into his life. And it was easy because he really wrote fairy tales that were almost little autobiographies, little snatches of his life, disguised as fairy tales. And so once I realized that, it worked just perfectly. It was, some books take you years and years to do, and picture books can be harder than novels to write because of the need for compression and the lyrical line, and also making sure that they're available to the child reader. But this one just seemed to write itself.
Get out my list of questions here. You just answered two of them already. Actually, I have Corinne's list of questions too. We were curious about if you have some of the sketches or some of the reference material that we could look at. Dennis said you had some things.
Sure, I have, and we can, it's in the other room, we'll go and do that.
And then in general, working with illustrators, most of the time authors never get to meet the illustrators they're working with, but it sounds like you've met a lot of them. So.
I have over 100, probably 100 to 150 picture books. And I would say that about half of them I knew the illustrators ahead of time. And the other half, I not only didn't know them, but I would say a good quarter of them I have never met. Which is odd because I go to a lot of conferences, and not to have met a lot of the people. Now, many of the ones that I haven't met, I have written to and said how much I loved their work. With Dennis, because I knew him, it was a very different kind of relationship. He sent me some of the early work to look at, but I loved what he was doing. It looks very much like an old-fashioned book, and it's all in subtle, muted tones that make it look as if it could have been a book put in an old rotogravure section of a newspaper, with that kind of brownish tinge of an old book. So, it was just exciting to do. But I never felt shut out of the process, the way sometimes you do if you either don't know the illustrator, or sometimes there are illustrators who really don't want you there. You become an annoyance, or you become an intrusion, or you become a game changer for them when they don't want the game changed. Um, for example, Dennis and Jane Dyer and Ruth Sanderson, all of whom live around here, have always invited me into the process. Barry Moser, when we did a book together, said, I'll call you when the thing is finished. And that's fine. That's just the way he works.
Mhm.
He doesn't want someone looking over his shoulder and is not comfortable with it. And another illustrator I know, Brian Froud, who lives in England, won't even let his wife into his studio.
Hmm.
When his pictures are done, then and if you happen to be visiting as I was, that he said, all right, sit in the living room. And I sat there with his wife and his son, and he brings out the pictures because he doesn't want anyone intruding in the business of art. It's too personal a thing for him. But others, as I said, like Jane Dyer and like Dennis and like Ruth Sanderson, are perfectly willing to have you come to their studios and watch, see what they're doing, see the variety of things they've tried, and sometimes they will even ask, "What do you think of this?" And I've been an editor, so I give them. I don't give them the personal so much as I give them the editorial, but I always start by saying, "This is great. I love this." Because I wouldn't want somebody looking over my shoulder and going, ooh, you have to do this, ooh, you have to do that. I want them to first say how much they love it. So I would do that to an illustrator.